Okay, so here's a look at the shock absorber in a 5.5, 7.5 classic OMC lower unit. Here's the drive shaft, of course, and the drive shaft and the water pump housing, impeller, all has to come out. Loosen the screws up. These are already loose. And then lift the pump housing off and pull the drive shaft out. Impeller is in here. Then the impeller plate comes off and the drive shaft bearing carrier is underneath that. This comes out, and this one's actually for a 10 horse, but it's the same. The only difference is the diameter of the bearing. But that's how it should look on the bottom if it hasn't been worn by the sprung or broken shock absorber. The shock absorber is in there. There should be, there's the paper gasket, and that seals against this surface. When you put it back together, you should put sealant on both sides. The drive shaft comes out, or the shock absorber comes out like that. This one's not in the best of shape, but you can see the shock absorber itself looks okay. The stub shaft is a bit corroded, but it doesn't look like this one has sprung or broken, so it would probably work. I would have to measure it and make sure that it is the correct length. If it's not, either put it in a vise and squeeze it, or chuck it in the vise and beat the thing back together with a hammer till it's the correct length, and then weld this seam around here. I usually just put several tacks around the outside of it and then grind it down so it doesn't hit the inside of this bore when it's spinning around. Once that's done, this would go back in. That actually goes into the pinion gear on the inside of the gear case underneath. Bearing carrier goes back on the top with the sealant. Make sure you line up your holes. Impeller plate goes back on. And then the drive shaft and the water pump, impeller, and the housing all go back on, just like it came out. Tighten the screws back down and let it sit until the sealant cures, and that's how you would replace the shock absorber. The gear case may need to be resealed too, but that's a whole different topic. That gasket needs to seal underneath the bearing carrier to seal the gear case, but then of course you got oil seals. The oil seal for the drive shaft is in the top side up here. Obviously this seal is too large for this drive shaft because it's for the 10 horse, but there's the seal for the drive shaft. There's the seal for the prop shaft. There's no guts in this gear housing, but then between the skeg and the top half there is a spaghetti seal that goes around here, and when the skeg goes on, that seals that up, and I usually put sealant on that also. Usually got to put some in the groove to hold the spaghetti seal in place, which is in the skeg, and then a thin layer on the surface on the top half, and then bolt it together. But this is primarily just for the shock absorber repair or replacement, and that's how that works. It's not too tough to get to. It's not that difficult to do. Like I said before, if it's been damaged, I always weld them together and then put a brass pin back in the prop to save the gears. Then you don't have to worry about that thing springing again and ruining the bearing carrier. These things are getting a little bit harder to find, so I don't like to ruin these. Anyway, hopefully that helps.